Welcome to our amDirt guide on the fist. At a glance, deceptively low hand size and high HP, the unique playstyle of the fist is based around card recovery, earth and ice elemental affinities, ability to place and utilize icy terrain, can inflict brittle. Try to combine with classes that share elemental affinities. In particular, the snowflake and the fist have some cracked synergies. Before we get into the guide, a quick note on icy terrain placement and featureless hexes. A hex with no overlay tiles except corridors and pressure plates are considered featureless. This means that you can place icy terrain under enemies and friends as long as there are no other overlay tiles like difficult or hazardous terrain. This may sound obvious, but it caused some discussion within our play group, so worth clarifying. Another quick couple of notes on placing icy terrain through your AMD. Enemies are not adjacent to themselves, so if you hit something and draw the AMD to place icy terrain, you cannot put it underneath the enemy. The timing of placing the icy terrain and force movement is at the same time, which makes it ambiguous, basically meaning that if you have an attack with push and draw the icy terrain AMD, you can put the icy terrain behind the enemy and push it through. Icy terrain can still be placed if drawn in the AMD if the enemy dies. Now, onto the unique playstyle of the fist and the reason for those big strong hands. Card recovery. This is not a new concept across the Havenverse. There are a handful of card recovery abilities and items, but the fist utilizes it as part of its core playstyle. The reason those fists are so big is how frequently you'll be picking up cards from your discard. Every day is hand day for the fist. The primary way the fist recovers cards is by using the top of One with a Mountain, which allows you to recover one card played that round at the cost of health based on the level of the card being recovered. There is a helpful reference chart for this on the character board, so you don't need to calculate it every time. Timing of this ability is interesting as well, as it occurs at the end of the round, not at the end of your turn, and you may choose if it's before or after discarding active round bonuses. Sounds confusing, but it gives you some cool interactions with cards that have these round bonuses. As an example, if you look at Encase Punch, the round bonus from the top of the card states that when you suffer damage this round, one adjacent enemy also suffers 1 damage. So if you choose to trigger the card recovery before you discard the active round bonus, then you would suffer damage from One with a Mountain, activate the round bonus and apply 1 damage to an adjacent enemy, but you would not be able to recover Encase Punch. Alternatively, if you were to trigger the card recovery after you discard the active round bonus, then you wouldn't trigger the card, but you'd be able to pick up Encase Punch. Keep this in mind when playing Encase Punch, Cold Boulder, Fury of the Mountain, and Thick Frost. Another way the fist can recover cards is by using Preserved Fury, which allows you to pick up 1 discarded card as a base or 2 discarded cards if an element is consumed. This card cannot be recovered using One with a Mountain, which makes sense, otherwise you'd never need to rest. The benefit of recovering cards with this ability is that it does not cost HP, so this is a good way to get back your higher level cards. Now look, initially my heart sank when I saw a hand limit of 8, but after playing the class and mathing out some options, it turns out you end up having slightly more playable rounds at level 1 than a hand limit 9 class. Once you hit 5 and have some external sources of card recovery, you can push up to similar playable rounds as a 12 hand limit class. Most 11 and 12 hand limit classes are reliant on a persistent or 2, but I use the max available as the basis of comparison. The downside to this, though, is that if you burn cards through usage, damage, or any other reason, it can quickly take the wind out of your sails. Also, to have that many rounds available, it means that you're having to eat your own face constantly. Now, in my Bone Shaper guide, I said its health was like a yo-yo. Well, it was nothing compared to the fist. The difference is that the cause of the damage is also the solution. What One with a Mountain taketh away, it also giveth, in the form of regen. Regen and healing. Once you play One with a Mountain, you always have regen. Normally, if you were to take damage, regen would fall off, but if this card is active, you immediately regain it. This partially offsets the health cost of recovering a card, but does not scale. For higher level cards, an effective way to mitigate the health cost is to make sure that you have ward at the end of your turn. Using Thick Frost as an example, you can pair it with a late card for initiative, play the bottom and apply ward to yourself, then recover it for 5 health, which is halved because of the ward and rounded down, so 2. That's assuming you don't lose the ward as part of your turn. Additionally, conditions that trigger at the start of your turn all happen at the same time, which again is ambiguous. So you can decide to trigger the regen first, which basically eliminates wound, bane, poison, and brittle. The fist has a lot of self-healing through card abilities as well as the amD, and you need to make sure that you have an assortment to be able to maintain the tempo of regaining cards. Now that we've covered the basics, let's look at some of the slipperier aspects of the fist. Icy Terrain. Another unique aspect to the fist is the utilization of Icy Terrain. Not only can you place it, but you also have abilities that are enhanced by your target occupying it. I had a lot of fun making slip and slides around the scenario, which allowed slower moving party members to catch up to the battle, or setting up slides of doom where enemies could be pushed and pulled into hazardous terrain. Just be careful with this though, you don't want to make it easier for the enemies to get to your party. When you have the perk to ignore item effects, you also gain the ability to ignore the slide and add +1 to movement per icy terrain entered. This gives you some serious mobility around the board, so there's no excuse other than bad positioning. There are only a few cards which are enhanced by attacking targets on icy terrain. The main benefactor of this is Glacier Slam, which adds Pierce, but if you can set this up, the payoff is monumental. Imagine for a moment that you have the enemies right where you want them. You've just unleashed a devastating attack. Wouldn't it be great if you could do it again, or more than twice? Oh wait, you can. Play that same song.
Play that same song! All right, same song, here we go!
We've covered the card recovery mechanic ad nauseum. It gives you staying power with a small hand size, but there is an added benefit to picking up a played card. You can do it again next round, or even multiple rounds in a row. If you're in the front line and need some shields, pick up that card.
Play that same song!
Want to pump those AoE attacks? Pick up the card.
Play that same song!
amD doesn't have 10 bless cards? Pick that card up. And
play that same song!
Are there some featureless hexes that could be icy? Well, pick that card up and
play that same song!
Need to get from one side of the scenario to the other? Pick that card up.
Play that same song!
Personally, I feel like this is the true strength of the fist. This and the impact of the elements. Every card the fist has access to has some form of elemental interaction, be it building, spending, or both, which I believe is unique to the fist. Upon quick review of the classes we have available, the fist's base skills seem to be slightly lower than most, but the elemental benefits seem to be slightly higher. This outlines how impactful elements are for this class. I've seen some conversations around picking a specific element and trying to build around that. It has its merits and simplifies your card choices, but for me, I felt the fist was truly unleashed with both elements. Level brackets, 1 to 4. Use the early levels to come to grips with the card recovery mechanic and feeling out the tempo. Swap around your 1 and X cards to find a playstyle that you enjoy. Most of your XP comes from consuming elements, so make sure you have a balance of builders and spenders. 5 to 9, this is where card selection gets a bit tricky, as higher level cards are strong, but they cost considerable HP to recover. Make sure you have a couple of 1 or X cards in the mix for the elements and low HP cost for recovery, but try to pair them directly with your big cards to optimize impact. Perks. As always, the first perk I took was to ignore item effects. This is particularly critical for the fist as it enables additional movement using Icy Terrain. Just remember not to jump through it. I prioritized Heal Self and Icy Terrain next, as most of the low-level cards generate elements. These were next on the priority list though, as it saved a round or two in setting them up. From there, I focused on thinning out the negatives and adding in some positives. The other 2 passives are pretty good, but were lower on my priority. Admittedly, I forgot I had the 2 ticker in most scenarios, but it did come in clutch when recovering a big card or taking a crit. Masteries. Recover at least 1 card from your discard pile. Each round is very easy to accomplish. A Stampot can help with this if there's a round where you don't want to trigger one with a mountain. The setup for 10 hex move and 10 damage needs to be planned out. Icy Terrain and the perk play a major role in accomplishing this. You don't have a big base hit until later levels, so look to use Brittle late in the round before to convert those base 5 hits into 10s early in the next round. The item from the solo scenario may help here as well. I lucked out when achieving this and had a crit on an attack 5, but still needed to do the groundwork setting up the Icy Terrain for the movement. 1,
Yep.
1, 1,
Yep.
1,
You don't know how to count.
1, 1, 1.
Mm-hmm.
So that
That's
should
5.
be, yeah. Then 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's 10 move in a round.
Oh,
Yeah.
this is gonna be so juicy, Mark.
Come on, best boy.
Now I'm attacking for 5.
Yeah.
Items. Rather than going through all the items and item slots, I'll simply highlight some themes that enhance the fist's ability to perform. Take as many stampots as you can get. External healing, mitigation, look for items that top your HP or provide ward outside of your cards to keep the recovery tempo going. Both boots with passive heals are very helpful. Elements. Given the heavy reliance on the elements, bring some items that can create change or negate elemental requirements to get the most out of your abilities if a pesky enemy or party member decides that they look tasty. Tappable items. These are fine in the early levels, but lose value as you get higher. On average, my first rest turn was on turn 11, which in most cases was only a handful of turns away from finishing the scenario anyway. My advice, the fist is not a tank. You need your HP. That being said, try to take hits that are coming with negative conditions. It's worth you taking a few of these hits with wound to save the rest of your party from having to deal with it. A special card shout out for dealing with multiple poison attacks is Cold Boulder. If you have this round bonus up, you're essentially immune to poison, even with multiple attacks coming from enemies that round. As a melee striker, you're going to need to learn to initiative weave. I mentioned this in the Bone Shaper guide for summons, and it applies to melee heavy classes as well. Go late to avoid the melee hit, move in, attack, then go early in the next round to mop up and then move out if you need to. Your bonus XP and strong abilities come through elements. If you have allies with similar affinities, communicate what you would like to use and what you can create. The Icy Terrain interaction is a really fun part of the class and not to be overlooked. It's impactful and can create some really memorable moments at the table. I'm told you can play without one with the mountain, and this is true. There's just enough tools to make it viable, but it seems like the key to the class. Summary. The Fist is a scrappy brawler and a welcome addition to the front line. The abilities and playstyle make for a unique and flexible experience. If all goes to plan, you alone win the war of attrition. But if fate turns the tide, you're in for a quick exit. That wraps up our guide to the Fist, and we hope this has been in some way helpful for all those getting ready to put their hands in the freezer.